we are facing a democratic crisis here. And this is a crisis, not only a health crisis, it's also a human rights crisis, a civil liberties crisis. I want in particular to mention to the Noble Lord, the Minister, Section 51 and Schedule 21. And these are the coercive elements of the Act, and they should be repealed. There is no doubt that they are superfluous now. They are no longer necessary. Arguably, they've never been necessary, and they've certainly never been used lawfully. The Crown Prosecution Service took the unprecedented step of regularly reviewing every prosecution made under the Act, and not a single prosecution was lawful. People have been wrongly prosecuted and wrongly convicted under this rushed and chaotic legislation. I think the Noble Lord has to agree that a law that results in 100% wrongful convictions should be repealed immediately, and I hope the Minister will commit to that today. Parliament passed this Act at lightning speed, and I do have some sympathy for that because it was a crisis and we had to react. And it was passed as emergency legislation because the government assured us that these were absolutely necessary and highly urgent to fight the virus. The government has just produced a very helpful Coronavirus Act assessment ahead of this debate, and it goes through all of the Act and sets out which parts are in force, how they're being used, and what justification is given for continuing to leave them in force. But no real justification has been given for keeping the criminal parts of this Act, other than that they might come in handy if other enforcement doesn't work. Now, this is nonsense, I would argue, especially when the government is imposing £10,000 fines on people who fail to self-isolate. So there is absolutely no justification anymore for these criminal parts of the Act. On the issue of civil liberties and protest, the government has still not addressed concerns about the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. This Act empowers the government to ban any kind of gathering with no safeguard nor protection for peaceful protest. Peaceful protest is a part of our democracy. Now, I know that this government doesn't really like democracy because it means they have to answer to the media sometimes and us sometimes a little in a very pallid way. But quite honestly, the blanket assertion by the Home Secretary that the Black Lives Matter protests were illegal was quite shocking. I mean, we are seeing some shocking things coming out of this government team, and well, an election would be welcome if that's, anything that the government would find attractive. So I would suggest that the issue of civil liberties, human rights, and the right to peaceful protest, which is enshrined in our democratic processes, should be a little bit more considered than the government is currently doing. I would, of course, vote for the regret motion. I very much regret it's not tougher, and it was a complete shock to agree with so much of what the Noble Lord, Lord Robotham, was saying. But, well done.